Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. Our next guest is sounding the alarm that Silicon Valley and the West have lost their way. Joining us right now is Alex Karp, Palantir's CEO and co-founder. His first book is out this morning, The Technological Republic, Hard Power, Soft Belief, and the Future of the West. We want to thank you for joining us.
It's kind of risque.
It's a little risque, you think?
The title, it's hard to know if it's like an off-color movie, Hard Power, Soft. But
I like that. Wow, he goes there early.
It's hard to know. It's hard to know.
I have about a million questions about the book, but before we get there, I just want to ask you a couple things about the news, because interestingly, I would say the book, which you wrote a year ago, in a way, you were predicting where we would be today in terms of some of the big issues.
The interesting thing, basically, what people should, it's not actually the standard book comes in two forms. Either promote yourself, it should be Karp AI, or it's somebody running for president. I'm doing neither. And so the book really is an attempt to say, look, everything you learned at your school and college about how the world works is intellectually incorrect. And here is a way of seeing the world that may not be right, but it's not wrong. And so trying to be right is very hard, but you can definitely know what's wrong. And what you've been taught in college, that you basically should have no beliefs, that the West is inferior, that the intellectual tradition of the West, it leads to self-flagellation and losing on the battlefield, losing intellectually, losing your party, losing your country, losing your border, that your institutions can't work because we're so good. It's actually wrong. And the West was actually never about that. And you can be good, decent, and win, and be intellectually correct. And what was absolutely spot on about what's in the book is we have this technological revolution. It's no longer fake. 3-4 years ago, institutions basically thought I'd rather have a good steak dinner and a bad product, and at least I get the steak dinner because the software product doesn't work. Now we are in a software-defined world, and the nation that leads software is the USA. And what does that mean for all institutions? What it means is those institutions have to actually live up to their core mandate. So a country has to have a border, the educational institutions have to work, the military actually has to be scary. You actually can have things function in a way where the outputs are much greater than the inputs. And people who ignore this are going to be washed away.
Why'd you write this? Were you mad at the educational system? Did you think that they were teaching the wrong things? What sparked it?
Look, I think the West, as a notion and as a principle upon which it is executed again, is obviously superior. Mm-hmm. And not acknowledging that, because by not acknowledging it or denying it, you could pretend you were smarter or better than you were, has led to enormous problems in our society. And also, for the sake of humanity, we have been blessed with a resource called talent management and software production that no other country has. So what does that mean for us? What does it mean for the world? How do you manage that ethically? How do you, and how do you prevent what we had? Essentially, we had a pagan religion that has infiltrated our universities, and that pagan religion basically says everything that's good about America, everything that actually works, is ipso facto bad. And by the way, you can't talk about it not working because it's a religion. So it's not even, and it's a new religion. It's not an old great religion, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It's a new religion, and the tenets are West is bad, nothing can work. If it works, it's bad, and the West is, and that way of thinking has corroded every aspect of our society. Last not least, it leads to a situation where you get a complete corrosion of all institutions and to a legitimacy crisis. So no one actually believes anyone's an expert. I'll just make this last point. In the 50s, if there was this famous professor, Ken Arrow, and if Ken Arrow said you were smart, you got tenure. And why did that happen? It was because people knew Ken Arrow is smart, the institution he represents is the best in the world. There is no one like, actually, the only thing like that currently in tech is a Palantir degree. If you work for Palantir, everyone knows you're good. And that's basically, none of these, like when we went to school, the schools actually had credibility. The science was actually science.
Okay, so let me just ask, and then I want to actually get into some of the news, but what would you do to bring it back, and do you think we're on that path now?
Well, I think actually, so one of the things that's not in the book, I think if you read the book, it reads like it was written today. But so one of the things that I would, if I were writing the book today, there's a sense that people have that there's a pendulum swing. So if you if you look at institutions that are failing and you talk to the smart people there, universities, UN, Democratic Party, they'll tell you there's going to be a pendulum swing back. But AI is actually breaking the pendulum swung. So what Europe thinks, if you're like, I spent half my life in Germany, you talk to smart Germans, they're like, okay, we're having a bad time. We're going to have a good time. We did this under Schroeder. It'll come back. We don't actually agree with all the stuff that people say. We can't say it publicly. That's what they say. Okay, but what they're not understanding is the technical revolution now is so great, you got to get on the train because that train is leaving and there is not going to be a swing back. So what I'm trying to say to people who are on the pendulum, people who are builders, is like, we have a responsibility. We have to be dedicated to our nation. What I'm saying to people who think they can get off the train, university intellectuals, United Nations dedicated to undermining America and anyone who's Jewish or something, you're being left behind. And by the way, I'm happy you're being left behind. But just know, if you get left behind, do not cry that you're not part of the dialogue. And that's actually what's happening. They're like crying, like all these people are becoming protest parties. It's like, I grew up protesting in DC with my parents and no one listened. If you want to go back to that, just do not read the book, pretend this isn't happening.
Alex, how did so many, whoever's hiring at colleges, it was just sort of a mass hysteria to all be on the same page for who gets tenure and what dogma and orthodoxy makes you attractive to college, because it's everywhere. I don't understand how it happened, and I don't think we ever get it back.
Well, I understand how it happens. It's like this country is fundamentally Calvinist. So that's one of the great strengths of this country. And what Calvinism basically says, as opposed to like Lutheranism and other, is if you've done something big and important, you're probably a good person. And what you had at universities was an inversion and rejection of that. And so all the intellectual movements are downstream from that. And so and that inversion is very, very charismatic if you want to assume that you are right because you're wrong, basically. And it's a very, very charismatic movement. But I think the area where we bear responsibility, who disagree with it, is we have to stand up and say, but this doesn't work. We have to, one of the things in the book that's unusual is I'm quoting, like, judge them by the fruits they bear. Like, okay, you're in favor of this world order. What have you built that works? Like, show me any institution that you've created, any institution. And I want to see that institution where the inputs are less than the outputs. So okay, and I don't care what it is. It could be an intellectual project. It can be a road. It can be a skyscraper. It can be a weapon system. And what you will find is they'll literally say, I reject that frame. And that's okay, but it's our responsibility to hold them to account. You rejected the frame of something that could work. I'm not saying that everything I'm saying is right. I don't know that, but I am certain that what you're saying does not work, and you will be left behind in history.
Alex, let me ask you a couple of things that are in the news, and I just want to actually relate one of them to something you just said. You lived in Germany for half your life.
Yeah. And
there is a big debate going on about the politics in Germany right now. You're also Jewish. And there is support, and you've even seen it over the weekend. Marco Rubio and Elon Musk and others have been very supportive of the alt-right movement in Germany, while there have been questions about their association with some supporting Nazis and other things. I'm curious where you land on that.
I don't want to go into the technical weeds here, but the problem in Germany is that somehow the small portion of Germans that believe you cannot talk about migration without being a bigot, which is about probably 15%, 90% of them vote for the Green parties, have somehow tricked the larger parties into saying they will only vote for things if the far right doesn't vote with them, which basically, as a matter of pragmatic power, shifts all immigration policy to a small group of people that literally will not let you discuss the fact that Afghani immigrants to Germany have a 70x propensity compared to German population to commit certain kind of crimes. And that in the last couple of weeks, every single terror attack has been the result.
Did you go to jail for pointing that out?
you'll get into trouble. But this is the weird thing. Again, there's a lesson in this book, which is do not allow yourself to become a product of people you may tacitly agree with. So, like, I'm sympathetic with non-discrimination. I don't believe in discrimination across any variable. But you are being turned into a product by a certain small sector of the left because you're not allowed to talk about facts. Like, in the last couple of weeks, every week there's what happens in Germany is there's a terror attack in the morning and the Greens and the left protest the far right in the afternoon. This is literally what's happening. And the average German, I know so many Germans who would never even use the term Alternative für Deutschland 4 weeks ago that are telling me, like, yeah, screw it, I'm going to vote for them. And the reason why is it's our responsibility. And you see this, by the way. Why is the Democratic Party committing suicide? It's because
in the U.S. you're talking about.
In the U.S., it's the same thing. It's like we're not allowed to admit, we're not allowed to do true false. Like, okay, I agree with this person, I don't agree with this person. We literally have to say anything that's ever been uttered from this person in their total timeline has to be wrong, including border, defense, and this is happening in every Western country. And again, it's very similar to the question you asked. Okay, we know why they do it. The Greens and others are really smart to do this because then in the end, they define how the society's run. But none of us want that society. And it's not bigoted to say, wait a minute, this is not working. And then you have follow-on issues. It's like, then, by the way, then on the outside, what I tell my German friends in private is, okay, you don't like what people are saying. But if you're not taking your immigration policy seriously, you have no tech scene. Germany had the most important tech scene in the world pre-war, bar none, like in America. It has de facto almost no tech scene. It's nascent. No one believes in it. No one's investing in it. The energy policies make no sense. And then you wonder why people don't take you seriously. You got to, in this book, it's basically like, fix your thing at home or no one's taking you seriously. And then when people don't take you seriously, you get mad. Honestly, though, I'll tell you what, I shouldn't even say this, but what I tell Europeans in private is, you know how when you go to the inner city in America and the mayor's talking about safety and you're like, get me out of this country? I tell them this in German. That's what we're thinking about your tech scene. No one's, anyone seriously is telling you this is a joke.
Let me ask you one question, though.
And by the way, like, yeah.
I want to ask you about Ukraine, but let me just ask you one German question, which is, but how do you feel about some of the folks that are part of that far-right party? And how do you capture, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, but again, let me just tell you, let me take a trick from the old thing. If you focus on some of those people I obviously don't like and probably don't like me, and is there anti-Semitism on the right? Yes, but the structural issue in Germany is actually anti-Semitism in an immigrant population. That is that is the biggest issue in Europe. But by the way, the point I'm trying to teach people is focus on what you believe. I don't really want to talk like, yes, there are people who will vote for me I don't like, and they don't like me. It's like, and on every issue, like there are people who agree with me on Israel and I don't agree with on First and Second Amendment. It's like you have to focus on what do I believe, and you know what? There are going to be some people who come with me I don't like and don't like me. That's okay.
Speak to this because we've been talking about Ukraine all morning, and you've been very involved in that battle. I want to show you this real quick if I could. I don't know if we even have time. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was just speaking literally moments ago, and after a 4.5-hour meeting with Russian officials in Saudi Arabia to reset relations with Moscow, and I would get to your thoughts on it if we could.
The goal of today's meeting was to follow up on the phone call the President had a week ago and begin to establish those lines of communication. The work remains. Today is the first step of a long and difficult journey, but an important one, and President Trump is committed to bringing an end to this conflict.
We are trying to bring an end to the conflict. Apparently, we're also asking for something on the order of $500 billion in terms of access to minerals and other things for Ukraine. Is that a fair deal?
Okay, look, I don't know anything about the deal and the intricacies of it. What I would say is, first of all, you put up people on the screen who are very talented. So if I look at this from an entrepreneurial perspective, the first thing I'm looking at is, okay, those three people are very talented. The second thing, I'll tell you something I think Trump does very, very well. He says, I'm not going to accept a paradigm that essentially leads to a stupid conclusion. And he's like, okay, great. I'm going to give you a new paradigm. You don't like my paradigm? Give me another one. And I think I think he's quite brilliant at this. So what I see is he's like, I'm not accepting a paradigm where America just keeps financing things. There's no real discussion. I'm sending three of the most talented people there. Let's figure it out. But and again, what I would say to people who are trying to figure out how to make themselves, how to be builders is do not accept a paradigm that is stupid, no matter who tells you that you should have it.
Okay, let me ask you a different question about paradigm shifting. So one of the things that's going on right now, Elon Musk working with the Doge team in Washington to try to get at some of the misspending that's been going on over the years.
Fraud, waste, and abuse.
And I think there's a lot of people who are super supportive of that. At the same time, you're hearing about resignations and all sorts of other things of folks who are questioning the access that they're getting to data. You are somebody who lives within data. You care about safety and security of data. Do you think we should have those concerns? And is there a way to do whatever's being done right now so that you can take the country and those who are questioning all of this with you,
well,
if you will?
What I don't like about what's going on is I just view this as, well, let's watch the Democratic Party commit suicide. And like, I've been a Democrat most of my life. I kind of view myself as outside it, but I don't like watching the Democrats just commit suicide. And what I see is most of the country doesn't really, at this point, given the fraud, waste, and abuse we know is there, 90% of the country is like, get rid of that fraud, waste, and abuse. And I just view this as yet another example of the progressive left boxing themselves into a suicide dance. Now, what the progressive left should be doing is saying, okay, Elon, you're clearly the most qualified person in the world to do something like this. We want to dialogue with you about how you're doing and what are you doing. I don't believe that's actually what happened. And again, I like Elon. I know I think he's obviously the most important builder in the world. And I just think, if you want to say my former side, I don't believe that they're actually engaging. I think it's like another dance where I'm supposed to say, of course, like whatever. It's like there's this one issue where I might, and then you get boxed into you cannot solve the problem. And then I would say, what is the biggest problem in this society? Biggest problem in this society from my perspective is legitimacy of our institutions. Why aren't they legitimate? They're not legitimate because, okay, do any of you really believe that 99% of your taxpayer dollars are being spent? But last and not least, and probably arguably most importantly, there's two revolutions happening. One is transparency and one is AI. Okay, so why is it that we do not know where every penny of our money goes? Like, how do you explain that to people? And by the way, slightly more technically, what large language models do is they mean you can go into the contracts and see exactly what happened. So in the past, we couldn't do this. Now we can. The right response is, we want this to happen, we want to happen, we want to be involved in the dialogue. The real response is, it feels like the people criticizing Elon don't want it to happen. And this is going to destroy those people.
Alex Karp, the book is called The Technological Republic. We want to thank you for being here.
You come back tomorrow?
You can come back tomorrow.
Can you come back
next
tomorrow?
day. We can do this.
We're going to
I'm not used to, I thought this was a joke because I'm not used to being reinvited.
No, we're starting at 6.
We'll
see you
start
there.
at 6. We got 3 hours.
We're going
to do it every morning.
Because you're just getting started. We're not off yet.
We're not off?
We got about 15 seconds before we hand it over to the
I just told everybody I want you back
okay. Well, I'm not used to, like, the Groucho Marx thing. I wouldn't go to a club that would have me as a member. I'm not used to being reinvited.
See you tomorrow morning.
Take care.
Make sure you join us. Squawk on the Street is next.